Hello and welcome to today's LinkedIn Live from Linkability with your host, Linnea Johnston. Thank you so much for joining us. We are looking so very much forward to today's event where we are talking to the Courage champion, Martin Stark, on how to use storytelling to become visible and memorable on LinkedIn. So we really hope you will get a lot out of today's live, and we ask that if you have questions, please to put them in the chat, and when Martin and I have finished talking, we will make sure that we bring them up on the screen and Martin can answer those for you. Now, a bit of housekeeping before we get underway. Won't keep you long on this. As I say, you're most welcome to ask Martin questions, and if you have any comments at all, please do put them in the chat. We're always happy to hear from you, and it's nice to know where people are joining us from, because people come from all over the world today. And we would also like to mention that out front we have Gillian Moore and our team member Cher Ferguson in the audience, and they will be monitoring the comments and adding any links that we mention in our chat today. Right, that is the housekeeping all over and done with. So let's talk about our guest. Now, Martin and I first met with through a connection of both of ours, Roy Kowalski, who's in the audience. Hi, Roy. Nice to have you with us today, and thank you always for your support of our events. And I really started to like Martin very quickly because of his storytelling ability. He's a really, really nice man, and he has just this most wonderful way with stories and with words. Now, we're going to hear more about him from him in just a moment, but I do want to mention a couple of things about him just to put this into context for you. Now, Martin is a two-time LinkedIn top voice. Now, the two-time is really important, and we'll talk about what a LinkedIn top voice means very soon, but that is a really significant accolade to have, and it is bestowed by LinkedIn themselves. He's the Courage champion. He's the founder of the World Gay Boxing Championships, and he's just returned from Chicago, and he's going to tell us all about that. He's a keynote speaker, and he's been featured on CNN, the BBC, ABC News, and in The Guardian, amongst many others. He's currently writing a book, which will be no doubt fascinating. He has his own audio room, which incidentally is on just after we finish our event today. So we'll make sure that there's a link to that in the comments for you as well. So I would very much like to welcome Martin Stark, who's based in Sydney, Australia, to our LinkedIn Live today. Hello, Martin. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, Lynette. Thanks for the warm welcome. What people probably don't know, we've been speaking for the best part of a year and actually had our first conversation 2 days ago. So how often do you know somebody and then you wait a year to have a conversation, but you know each other anyway? But anyway, my pronouns are he, him, and I would just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land where I currently am, the Gamaraga people, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander, and First Nations people.
I love that. That's not something that's common in New Zealand, but I have heard quite a number of Australian speakers begin their presentations like that, and I really do believe that is an important way to honour our cultural heritage and those who were here before us. So thank you for showing us some leadership already. We're going to be talking more about courage today and being a champion, but I would like to start with your recent trip to Chicago. So would you like, first of all, just to stand up and show the audience what you are wearing, please?
So this is the Chicago Cubs, and my name and number on the back.
Yes.
So I'm starting out with the story. And this is the baseball I threw. I'm one of the only Australians to have thrown the ceremonial opening pitch at a baseball game. And it's a huge, huge honor. My biggest audience, there are about 12,000 people at Wrigley Field, the most majestic baseball stadium in the world. and about 1 million people watching online on ESPN. So if you can imagine the pressure of throwing a ball with pretty much the whole world watching, and it was great fun. To be honest, I didn't care if it landed. I just wanted it to go hit the field. But I've just come
Uh,
back from Chicago after throwing the baseball. The first time ever going to a baseball stadium.
am I right in understanding that there was a bear involved? I remember watching that video, and I'm sure there was a bear.
There
There
was the
was,
club mascot, who's a cub, who's
right.
obviously the baby bear, and that was who I was throwing the ball to. But what people might not know is I took some Tim Tams onto the baseball field, because Tim Tams are Australia's most famous and delicious treat. And as a mark of respect, I took a family pack of Tim Tams to give to the Cubs. And I couldn't obviously take it when I'm throwing the pitch, but I took it onto the pitch and it was handed over to the team and staff, who were hopefully enjoying Oz's favourite snack, Tim Tams. So I took Tim Tams onto the field in Chicago.
This seems to be a trend, Martin. Our co-author on Business Gold, Michelle J. Raymond, who went to Denmark just a couple of weeks ago to give a presentation about LinkedIn company pages, took a suitcase full of packets of Tim Tams to give away to people who attended this conference in Denmark. So I think a trend has begun. There is no question. As long as you're not giving away pavlova, I do not mind what it is that you give to
I'm not very good at making Australia's most famous dessert, which I know you
that
do
was
very well in
stolen
New
from New
Zealand.
Zealand.
Come on. You know, one way to settle this.
One way to settle this, you're going to
Yeah,
set down
we
the
need to do
challenge.
bungee. We need to be doing bungee jumping in New Zealand, and I'm happy to nominate my good friend and Aussie champion bungee jumper, Roy Kowalski. So let's do a bungee jumping challenge, and you can nominate somebody. You might want to nominate Roy yourself, so maybe Roy can do 2 bungee jumps on our behalf.
Right. Well, that sounds like a lot of fun, a bit like falling out or jumping out of a perfectly good aeroplane, if you ask me. So we started with some stories. Tell us why you were in Chicago. It wasn't just to throw the first pitch, I understand.
No, I was in Chicago for the second World Gay Boxing Championships. So if people don't know my backstory, is I set up the not-for-profit World Gay Boxing Championships 4 years ago to disrupt homophobia in sport and increase LGBTQ plus and ally participation in boxing. And last year during Sydney World Pride, we held the world's first LGBTQ plus boxing competition. And a good friend of mine who I met on Instagram, Diego, he owns an LGBTQ plus gym in Chicago. He wanted to bring a team out to Sydney, but because we'd only met literally the week before, it was too short notice. And he said, why don't you hold the second competition at my gym in Chicago? So through one conversation, we devised a plan and we held an awesome boxing exhibition in Chicago on the 20th of June at his amazing gym, partnering with his business partner, Kale, who's an awesome boxing coach. And we had 7 bouts. There were gay, bi, straight, trans boxers, awesome supporters. And CBS turned up and they stayed for 5 hours and actually reported the final bout live.
Wow, that is amazing. Now, I imagine that that takes a lot of courage. So tell us how you became the courage champion, because I think it's just such a fabulous way to be known.
Really, it comes back to always being courageous and not knowing about it. And I define courage as taking ownership of fear, venturing forward with confidence and resilience. This is my tracheotomy scar here.
You'd have
And
to
it
stand
wasn't
up just a little higher.
stand up. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Okay.
This is my voice when I speak without using my diaphragm. So my backstory is in 2006. I was in the UK for a few weeks, but was admitted to hospital because I had gallstones blocking my liver. And a procedure was performed to try and remove the blockage. What happened was dye seeped into my pancreas. I ended up having 2 induced comas, septic shock, an undiagnosed rare disease. And the only way of saving my life was my worst fear, which was actually the tracheotomy. And I remember how that was performed, feeling the pressure of my neck, but focusing on the courage of the doctors and medical staff performing the procedure. During my 2 induced comas, I had nightmares which caused PTSD. A few months later, I was diagnosed with the rare autoimmune condition Addison's disease. It's a bit similar to type 1 diabetes. My body doesn't produce cortisol, and cortisol is your body's stress-producing hormone. In the event of a major infection, your body gives you cortisol. Mine doesn't produce it. So over the last 18 years, I've had 4 major surgeries, and I've been admitted to hospital over 70 times. Now, at the end of 2018, I almost died again from Addison's disease. And that experience brought back the memories of being in comas. So really the courage journey just started shortly after that. I discovered boxing, started boxing. In Mardi Gras 2019, I actually had courage painted on my back, and then I made that into a tattoo. And that's how the Courage Champion came about.
It's okay if you don't show us the tattoo, Martin. We'll forgive you.
That's okay. I've been asked 3 times on podcast. I'm keeping my shirt on this time.
Well, I've got a sore toe and I've been moaning about it for days, and I think I really better shut up really listening to that litany of near-death experiences. That would change a person, I imagine. So how does that inform your storytelling? And just to be clear, I didn't know any of that. I know some of your story, but I did not know anything about any of that. And I remember you saying on one of our Saturday events, Martin and I are on a Saturday audio room that is hosted by Roy Kowalski, and there are other co-hosts on it as well. And I remember that you have talked on there about a few different things that have happened to you over the years, but you've never really talked about this. But you have talked in one of those audio rooms about having a signature story. Now, is that your signature story, or because I've not heard you talk about that before?
So that's part of my signature keynote, Spark the Courage Within. So I'm a keynote speaker. I've spoken internationally this year in America, in Columbus, hopefully again later in the year. And I've spoken for LinkedIn, TikTok, Commonwealth Bank, NRMA and Waverley College. And I talk about ways to employ courage as a habit. But I share my story of living through my worst fear, getting my voice back, starting boxing, delivering global change in boxing. It's through storytelling that humans connect with humans. If you go for a job interview, that you are the star, that star. Tell me a time, the situation, the task, what did you do? Action, steps did you take, and what was the result? Situation, task, action, result. We have to relay stories. You think about ways brands connect with us through their advertising, through their storytelling. We make those emotional connections with brands through storytelling. You catch up with your friends at the weekend at your favorite coffee shop. The barista knows how you like your coffee to be made. You've shared that story with, can you give me an extra shot? I don't have sugar. Can you give me a sweetener instead? They just know how to make the perfect coffee, but you share the story of the barista, and the barista knows your story as soon as you walk in, because you don't even need to place the order. They're making the coffee for you. And I used the classic example of a family recipe. So the first Australian to make a pavlova, they wrote down the recipe, and that recipe was handed down from generation to generation. Their cousins from New Zealand were visiting, and they think, this is fantastic. And they took the pavlova recipe over to New Zealand and started making awesome pavlovas in New Zealand. I'm having fun, of course. I don't know who started pavlovas. Was it the Aussies or the Kiwis? But it's storytelling. Imagine your favorite dish. It's probably steeped in history. And it's those stories that we make those memorable connections.
I don't consider myself to be a particularly good storyteller, and I see storytelling as essential but quite hard to do. And so I'd like some ideas on how those who are like me, who find storytelling a bit difficult or think we're no good at it, how we can get started with it, and what kind of things that we can do to build that storytelling muscle so we get better at it.
I'm going to use the example of throwing the ceremonial opening pitch. So there is something connecting a character. Now, this is my jersey, the Chicago Cubs. My name is on the back. Stark.
Yeah.
The Stark, 22nd. I was born on the 22nd of February. So 22 is my number. Stark is my name. They only give those jerseys out to people throwing the ceremonial opening pitch. So what's happening is I'm wearing their jersey and I'm about to throw the ball. Now they announce Martin Stark, founder of the World Gay Boxing Championships, mentioning the event will be taking place at Strong Hands Gym in Chicago. So there is something happening to characters. They're conveying a message. My message is about fighting homophobia. So I'm throwing the ball. That ball being thrown is about conveying the message of homophobia. At the end, there is a call to action. I have a picture taken with the mascot. The call to action there is join us and be an ally. So 3 things. You have something happening to characters, which makes the story relatable. You are conveying a message. What do you want the other person to know? Are you educating them? And there's a call to action. What do you want them to do? Those are the 3 key constructs of a story. There are probably other layers to this, but if you can remember those 3 basic things and add that to your storytelling, you can tell a story about absolutely anything, even taking the trash out.
Now run those 3 things by us again, Martin, so that we've got them clearly in our minds.
So the first is something happening to characters. It's making
Yes.
that connection. The second is you are conveying a message or a lesson. And finally, there is a call to action.
All right, so that's quite a simple. People like to remember short lists like that, and it's really easy if there's only 3 things. And then, as you say, that you can build on those. All right, so how do you use storytelling on LinkedIn? You joined LinkedIn, actually became a member of LinkedIn, right? Set up account back in 2019, which is only 5 years ago. You're considered a LinkedIn expert by many, including me, and you have been a LinkedIn top voice twice. So how have you used storytelling to achieve all of that in just 5 years?
So 2 ways, really. I've always been sharing my story on LinkedIn. People have seen my journey from WGBC being an idea, speaking up about LGBTQ plus rights and rights for others who have been discriminated against, sharing my experiences of courage and advice of courage. So people have seen that journey, they've seen that growth in me and through me. Because remember, you always focus on your audience. Are you inspiring them? What value are you bringing to them? Now, I talk about a process which is MC-RON, which is your message and your content equals your relationships, your opportunities, and your networks. I'm a LinkedIn coach and trainer, and I have my own course, which I'm currently redeveloping right now. And I teach people how to get their profile optimized, have that compelling message, and then take people through a journey through quality content, which attracts the right attention, influences decision makers, and you can generate those warm leads or make those connections to grow your career and business. In terms of LinkedIn post, I use a process which I call CLEAR. The C stands for connect and set. This is your hook, that opening statement. Why do people want to read this? Are they going to see more or scroll on by? Imagine you're in a library and you're looking at all of the books, but there is one title which captures your attention. It's that hook. The next thing is lead with value. And this is more of a question for you. What do you want people to get out of the post? You open the book and you see the synopsis, the summary of the book, and you think, I want to read this book. I'm going to hire this or borrow this from the library. So you need to have something, a bit of an explanation, and it's that lead with value. And the E stands for education. This is delivering value, a couple of tips. It could be a video sharing a lesson, something relatable. And the final A in the R is action and rapport. You include the call to action. You read the book conveys the lesson. In the book, you see there are 4 more titles. You've built the relationship with the author, and you will either buy or borrow those other books from the library. So you think about the comments, the relationship, how you engage with other people, how quickly you can build a rapport with somebody. So it's called clear. Connect and set, the hook, lead with value, ask what do you want people to get out of this, consider the synopsis. E is the education, action, and rapport. So that's what I teach people to do on LinkedIn. And I see that as probably the most successful structure of a post. You do this all the time. Roy does this all the time, even in just how you're structuring this conversation right now.
Do you on LinkedIn write your stories, or do you use video mainly, or do you do a combination of both?
I mainly use video. I will try and do that in a text post, but I write stories in my newsletter with just short bursts of information or sharing a picture. So in my current newsletter, there's a picture of Muhammad Ali and a very short story, but I predominantly do it through video because it's the most impactful form of communication and content on LinkedIn.
Yes, we find engagement rates on LinkedIn with videos are quite high. People seem to really like them. I've been a bit slow on the uptake on this. I've been doing videos about my garden at weekends for some months now. A bit more difficult now because it's winter and there isn't so much to show. But come spring, I'm going to take all my videos out into the garden and you'll never see my office again. But I do think that makes it easy if you're taking yourself and putting yourself in a different situation where you can easily bring in stories. I wouldn't call what I do stories. I would call them talking about what's going on in my garden, what is happening in my mind about what I'm thinking about the garden, and then relating that back to LinkedIn, because I do think that if you're doing things on LinkedIn, it needs to have some kind of a business message in the main, not necessarily every single time, but in the main. And recently, though, I've been starting to do other videos of me standing here in my office, talking about more things to do with LinkedIn only and not about the gardening. I'm not a professional gardener. I don't want people to think that that is my main role or my main area of interest, but I do want people to know that about me and know that about me as a human, because I think otherwise what happens is we only get to know people at a business level. We don't know all these other things about them. We didn't know, for instance, that story about your several near-death experiences. We're very lucky to have you still here with us today by the sound of it. And I think that talking about things like that, and our last LinkedIn Live, we had Scott Mason with us from New York, and Scott had been through a similar, not a similar, but certainly a medical experience that really nearly took his life as well. And he told that in such an emotional way that we all had tears in our eyes, even those of us who'd heard the story before, because he was telling it in such a compelling and charismatic way, which is what that episode was all about. But it's the storytelling that seems to really make the difference. And if you can do that in video, I think that that's what really draws people in. But it's a lot harder to do than it sounds. At least I find it that way.
So I'm going to give you a tip. So right now I'm looking straight into the camera as I'm talking to you. So I can't actually see what you're saying in terms of a normal face-to-face comment. So if I look at you right now, I can see you, but you can't see me on the camera. You see, and there's the wave back. So looking to the camera, if you have an iPhone, look at the green light because it maintains the eye contact. But I practice videos by speaking in front of the mirror. When you write something, you will contain more points. Whereas a video, you want to have fewer points. 40 seconds to a minute is the sweet spot. I think LinkedIn recommends 30 seconds to 2 minutes. I disagree. I think a minute is probably enough because you want to convey a lesson, and our attention spans are limited. We're lazy. We don't listen like we used to. But when somebody captivates our attention, wow, we listen. And over a series of weeks and months and years, in my instance, if you're recording videos, people get to know you, like you, and trust you as they would the meteorologist giving the weather forecast, the chief economist from the bank giving the update on the financial news and if the stock exchange was up or down that day, or what's happening within the markets. So consider the 6 o'clock news as the example, the regular expert who you see week after week after week. You can do the same with video. And there's a trend I'm seeing, not necessarily around LinkedIn, but around influencers, the TikTokers, Instagrammers who've been on there for years. Now, brands have been going to them to be their brand ambassadors. I don't think it's working as well as it used to be, but brands are connecting more with thought leaders. People want to know who is the expert, listening to their trusted advice. And thought leadership has now been democratized. It's not just the chief economist who gets to share the economic news. It's all of us on LinkedIn, YouTube, blogs, or any other platform. So if you can build an audience, and I talk about a purposeful following, a reason why people connect with you and follow you, and vitality in your message. The health of your message is to the extent that other people talk about you warmly. They're more likely to refer to you. I know where to tell people to get a great coffee in the city of Sydney because I used to go to the same cafe, and the barista knows how to make a great cup of coffee, and the cafe owner sources the best beans in the world. Those are the things that make it more relatable.
When you and I were talking yesterday, before our live today, you mentioned something to me which I've been puzzling about since then, which I'd like to want you to talk about a little more, if that would be okay. You said to me that you should share things you shouldn't. Now, I've been trying to figure out what kind of things you should share that you shouldn't, and what exactly that really means when it comes to storytelling.
Now, the world of work has changed. The days of you going to the office, you need to be quiet, stay there until the boss leaves. That's the old world. But that doesn't mean to be this is how you react on LinkedIn. When you go to work, you go with your mates for coffee. You talk about what you did over the weekend. When you go on holiday, you talk about those relatable experiences. Those are the things you can start to bring to LinkedIn. And I talk about 3 types of content pillars. The first being educational, which should be about 60% of your content if you're a regular content creator. And then the other 2 types of pillars are inspirational, getting to like you. So the education is knowing, inspirational, getting to like you, but that entertainment, getting to trust you, getting to that further stage. So an inspirational thing for me would be throwing the ball at Wrigley Field, talking about boxing, sharing relatable experiences of boxing, me speaking on stage. Entertainment would be things about me being at the beach, sharing stories, or when I'm in Chicago or when I was in Ghana, sharing stories of the elephants, being close to the elephants. You just open things up. It doesn't have to be so conservative on LinkedIn. If you make it relatable for your business, not an Instagram post, I'm at the gym doing weights, more of a picture at the gym. From being here, I lead a more healthy lifestyle. It reduces my stress. Relate it back to your industry, professional business, but open up. Those are the stories that should be told, which aren't being told.
And we also talked about the importance of words. Now, as a professional writer, all my very long career, I understand the importance of words when it comes to putting them down on paper or onto posts on LinkedIn, and where things can easily be misconstrued, misunderstood, or taken in the wrong way. But you and I were talking yesterday about words within words and how we need to be really more careful about the kinds of words that we are using and their connotations and the meanings that people may take from them that may now be different from the ways that they used to be thought of. So could you talk about that? And you gave me a couple of examples yesterday. So I would like you to just talk about the use of words in storytelling.
So as a general guide, grade 8 level English and conversational language is best for LinkedIn. Now, words may mean different things to different people, but I'm a big advocate of inclusive language, not because I might be woke, because it's respectful. Now, I prefer the term champion to winner because a champion champions others. I think of Usain Bolt winning, but he looks around and he sees who has come second and congratulates them. I see Usain Bolt wanting the younger generation and all generations to be more active, and he's championing them. Now, winners, you may be a winner, but it's rude to call somebody a loser. And how often have you lost at something but won the third or fourth time? And it's through those losing you actually gain the experience. So I prefer champion to winner. Also, I don't like the word master because of the connotations of slavery and history. I prefer to use the term primary server and secondary server. I prefer using the word snickering when somebody's like, ee, because the British way of saying it has the M word. Although that's not what is meant, I deliberately say snickering because it is more respectful and inclusive. LinkedIn is a professional platform. So I think when you are intentional with language, and it is okay to make a mistake and get something wrong, but if you can use more respectful language, that is going to be appreciated, particularly if you're trying to sell to corporates, organizations, where respectful language is an expectation.
I think that's all very good advice, and most of us probably don't think about the words that we're using nearly as much as we should. So certainly I'm now much more aware of that and going to be looking at what I'm writing and with a different set of eyes, I think is the important thing, to see what is within rather than what's just there on the surface. I wanted to also ask you about the role of humour in storytelling, because I've been on these events with you and Roy Kowalski's audio room on Saturday mornings for 8 months probably now, and you always are telling funny stories and bringing humour to the room, and I absolutely love that, because a bit like storytelling, I can't tell a joke to save my life, and so I want to talk to you about the role of humour and how it makes us feel when it turns up in stories, and some of the pitfalls that there are in getting that kind of humorous story wrong, because that's easy. That's very easy to happen.
If we think about some types of humor, which some people find funny, others would find offensive, or they may find crude. So those are the things really to avoid on LinkedIn. But if we think about everyday scenarios which make us laugh, one of my favorite sitcoms of all time is Keeping Up Appearances. Hyacinth's bucket called Bouquet, and her friend every time spilling the coffee. Now, we all know a Mrs. Bucket. We all know somebody who's a little bit more pretentious. And those and it makes us laugh. Or the experience of you going to the supermarket and the trolley. I don't know what it is about shopping carts and trolleys. Their wheels go in different directions, and there's something about the shopping trolley. If you can bring those relatable, funny experiences, which we all know, that's where you bring humor to storytelling. That's probably the best way. And my husband always tells me off for my cleaning. He'll do it again. He said, I've missed the corners. When I do ironing, I can do one shirt well, the second shirt mediocre, and the third shirt, I add more creases to the ironing. I don't like ironing. And if I need something ironed, and it's a few days later, I will take it to the laundry to get steam pressed. It's those experiences that we laugh about. One of my favorite sitcoms of all time, and that's PC, was Open All Hours and Arkwright's Till. You know, there was something about that till that makes us all laugh. It's rickety. There's just something there. If you can bring those moments in, it's beautiful storytelling through humor.
And I love the cultural references to it too. Now, younger people may not remember some of those older sitcoms, but I'd like to think that some of them are coming back again now, and people are seeing them in different ways. Some of them obviously perhaps don't necessarily always translate to modern values. I certainly get that, but generally, a lot of the really good, solid classical humor certainly does that. And there is a role for humor on LinkedIn, I believe, which is generally not known for its jokes or its funny stories. And to be able to bring that to LinkedIn through your videos or through your written content, I think makes a big difference to how you come across, and your personableness, if that's a word, your personality shines through and gives you an opportunity to share a message, because there's usually a really good message that comes through with humor as well, when it is done well. I'm sure you'll agree.
One of, I suppose, the videos that I love the most is when I conquer one of my second worst fear, which was snakes. I went to the wildlife world in the city, and as I'm walking around, there's an olive python pretty much on the floor. And the handler picks him up, and I say, "Can I touch the snake?" And I conquered my fear of snake, actually touched the snake a few times and had the snake wrapped around my arm. And a few years later, I went back and held a python in my hands. Now, I know people who were so scared they were running for cover. And one of my friends said, and then what it is about snakes in that video, and I talked about Adam and Eve and being in the Garden of Eden. Imagine if I just shook the tree and all of these pythons just fell down the tree. And she burst out laughing. There's a relatable moment of an imaginary garden of an orchard full of pythons, and she's just laughing. It's a relatable experience, and it just brings that common bond. So just find some way which is relatable and universal. Those are my tips.
And also, you mention in there something that is imaginary. And I'd like to ask about whether or not we have to be entirely truthful, word for word, swear on the Bible, all that kind of stuff, with our stories, or whether it's okay to bring in imagination in our stories that we're telling, even on LinkedIn.
So your credibility is on the line here. So if it's a personal anecdote about something you've gone through, if you're making that up, I don't recommend that. Make sure that anecdote is relatable and is a unique and truthful experience. But if you're going to use a metaphor or an analogy, that's where you can use your imagination. So a few weeks ago, I was down at the beach and I used the analogy of there was a storm coming, and storms are problems which we go through. But the meteorologist, the weather forecaster, they guide us through. They tell us, don't drive, stay inside. They tell us how long the storm will be there for, and the next day it will be okay because we're going to have those sunny skies again. So that was an imagination, but it was a relatable experience because I was talking about a particular point. But don't make things up, because people will remember and will ask you, and you don't want to be caught out telling lies. You want to be known as truthful and connecting on that story that you shared.
I think that leads us very well into an area that I do want to talk about, that is around authenticity. And with the rise of AI on LinkedIn in the last 12 to 18 months in such a big way, it is much more difficult to tell now whether somebody is being authentic in their post, particularly a written post. I do think it's still easy enough to be authentic in video, because so far the tech hasn't quite caught up to inauthentic or AI generated videos in the same way that it's done with text. But what I like about stories is that they cannot be created and be truthful through the use of AI. And if we are telling stories, then they are clearly from our heads and clearly not from the brain of a robot. And so this would seem to me to be another way, like through video, to demonstrate your authenticity on LinkedIn, which builds that trust factor. Does that sound like a reasonable proposition?
The way I describe this as technology working and helping humans. AI is no different. If you use AI to the extent you are replacing your value, you are diminishing what you offer and bring to the platform, a potential employer, or a customer. Do you really want the customer to be speaking to AI and then speaking with you at the end? Absolutely not. You may use AI for idea generation, for getting a few hooks, for some research, but do not diminish your value using AI. It is obvious when somebody's using AI and it doesn't sound like them. I'll give an example. We have been joking about Pavlova on the audio rooms for a few months now. Imagine if it read like this. Lynette and Martin discussed the origins of Pavlova. Martin asserted that it started in Australia. Lynette disagreed because her cousin visited Australia several years ago and actually shared the recipes of Pavlova. Martin said no, it was his cousin. It doesn't sound like either of us. It doesn't. But for some people, that's what they post, and they do not replace anything about AI that's been generated. They just plaster it all over the board, and we can tell. And I will run a mile because I want to speak with genuine people and people who maybe have used AI for idea generation and shown how to use AI in enhancing your communication, maybe automating some admin tasks, but never removing humans from the conversation.
Amen to that. I want to finish off by asking you something that is a little left of field, but is to do with LinkedIn. Oh, I haven't asked you about your LinkedIn top voice. Tell us about that, what you think made LinkedIn, who can confer these blue LinkedIn top voice awards. What do you think contributed to LinkedIn giving you one of those, which are highly sought after, and you can't apply for them, and there's no transparent way of knowing how they decide to give these out, but they really confer a very strong and important view of from LinkedIn, that you are somebody to be watched, listened to, followed, and all those good things. What do you think you did that made you stand out in LinkedIn's view to give you these awards? Well, not once, but twice.
First of all, a simple, clear message and providing consistent quality content. And that's probably sounds very generic, but that was the truth. Now, in 2022, LinkedIn started LGBTQIA plus top voices. And it was all of my work for the previous 3 years of sharing the story of the World Gay Boxing Championships, speaking out against homophobia in sport, demonstrating how the problem could be solved. That's why I was selected by LinkedIn in 2022 and again in 2023, because they had LGBTQ plus top voices like they do for social impact, youth, environment. So they have different awards of top voices. That's how I was awarded the LinkedIn Top Voice twice.
Well, I think that's amazing. As I say, highly sought after, very hard to get. So I am very envious of you. They don't give them to LinkedIn trainers mainly, so I would never expect to be in the consideration for that. But I do think that it's important that LinkedIn has a way to be able to recognise people who are talking about issues that are important and are making a difference. So congratulations on that.
I just want to jump in here, right? There are 3 people who I've helped, some of them my former clients, or our current clients, and they're giving me testimonials on the now LinkedIn Top Voices who have incredible expertise. And that's what they've shared over a period of time and were awarded Top Voice because they shared quality content offering value and expertise. So you never know.
You never know. Well, congratulations to them as well, because as I say, it's quite hard to get these LinkedIn Top Voices. Now, LinkedIn is a relationship-based platform. You and I both believe that really strongly because we've had some really good experiences with the people that we've met through each other. And I wonder whether you could tell us a story about someone that you have met through someone else on LinkedIn who has made something possible, who's offered an opportunity, who's given you something different that you would not otherwise have expected.
Sajel Thacker. She is a very awesome, kind and compassionate human being. And we met about 5 years ago. And she has opened so many doors for me. I'm now one of the keynote speakers as part of the Ovations platform. She introduced me to some key people who have had some conversations within sport. And Sajel, along with Junaid Iqbal, Claudia, traveled to Chicago for the World Gay Boxing Championships. Future Kane traveled there. Susan, she came along to the World Gay Boxing Championships. So 5 people who I'd known for a period of time, had never met in person, traveled all the way to meet me in person at the most important part of my life, delivering my project with Diego and Kale at Strong Hands Gym in Chicago. So they become lifelong friends.
And that is the power of LinkedIn, I believe. And it is amazing who you can meet and who will reach out, and open doors and opportunities will arrive or will just happen on the back of that. So thank you for sharing that. Jackie Lane is one of those people who I met on LinkedIn who has become a friend. And I drove for some hours to visit her and meet her for the first time when she came to New Zealand about a year ago. And she took me out for a very nice dinner, I have to say. Now, her question about how long did you practice for, I think possibly it could relate to just about everything that you've said today, Martin, but I think that this question probably came up around your first throw for the game.
Right. I will tell you the story of how I was invited to throw the pitch. So my publicist, Nikki, who runs Priceless Media, she said, let's go to a baseball game when we're in Chicago. And I looked and saw Chicago Cubs were holding a Pride night. I said, oh, well, let's go to their Pride game. And then Nikki said, well, let's get in contact with the Chicago Cubs and see if they will give us a shout out for the World Gay Boxing Championships. Because there's just something about a baseball game. They just celebrate the community. They give shout outs. There's the national anthem. They recognize heroes. I thought, all right, let's see if we can get a shout out. So Nikki made contact with their PR team, who referred her to another team. And the Chicago Cubs came back and said, would Martin like to throw the ceremonial opening pitch at the Pride game? So Nikki called me up, jumped at the chance. One of my good friends, Professor James Elliott, he used to play baseball for the San Diego Padres. So he gave me a quick lesson in throwing a baseball the day before I went to Los Angeles. I was at an LGBTQ sports conference and I was telling people, and one of the guys there made a referral to an LGBTQ plus baseball team in Chicago. And I met with them a few days prior, and about 2.5 hours before I threw the pitch, I had a very quick coaching lesson. And for the record, I did throw the ball straight and it landed and he caught the ball. So it was just 2 very quick lessons, sharing the story and friends helping me out. If we think about LinkedIn referrals, 2 referrals were instrumental in getting those last minute lessons.
But also made the event much more fun for everybody else. And our friend Merrill, who I want to mention before you tell the story that he's asked about here, Merrill is a person who is a primary connector. I was going to use the M word, but I'm going to change that to primary connector. Merrill is someone who makes certain that people get invited to other people's events. And he is just an amazing person about getting the word out about all our events, our audio rooms, yours and mine and Roy's, and other people's as well, and inviting people to attend and making sure that the chat group alongside the audio rooms runs really well. So these days we have a Merrill. It is a noun that is related to what Merrill does for connecting everybody and inviting people to events. So Merrill, thank you for all you do for us and our events. And now let's hear, Martin, the question that Merrill has, or hear your story. I'm wondering whether he says train story, but I'm wondering if this is the bike story, or do you think this is something else?
Let me have a look.
Oh, yes. Sorry, you can't see that.
The train ride story. So, there are 2. When I was 10 or 11, family and I, we went to a big city on the train and visit a big shopping mall. And I was walking around with Mum, and I asked if I could buy a whoopee cushion, and she said no. So a few hours later, I was walking around with one of my brothers, and what's the first thing we do is buy a whoopee cushion. And we're getting the train back home, and the idea was to blow out the whoopee cushion and put it behind Mum. But we couldn't do that, so my brother blew the whoopee cushion, and it made the noise. My mum is all embarrassed, is telling him off. It was a quiet train carriage. And there were 2 guys from the army who knew exactly what was going on. And they basically did this. We can't spell anything. And then Mum sees the whoopee cushion and bursts out laughing. But she tells the story how she had a quiet patch train carriage and she hears the noise. Now, I use the analogy of you blow the whoopee cushion, you take one breath. What you say next makes an impact. So blowing a whoopee cushion up on a train, embarrassing Mum, making everybody laugh. One simple story. And I have to mention Doctor Who with Merrill. And he's a champion connector. There's no better connector than Merrill.
He certainly is, and as I say, we're extremely grateful for all that he provides to our events. He gives them all a completely different dimension that would not exist without him. So yes, an amazing person. Now, you've given us a lot of information today, several acronyms and ways that we can remember things, strategies for what we are doing, which we'll be able to put together as a document that is a summary of your conversation with us today, that will be able to help people with their own storytelling, I'm sure. Structure was the word I was looking for, which will help them with the structure of their stories. So I just would like to ask in closing whether or not there's anything else you want to say or add that I've not asked you today. And I would like you to tell people where they can hear you on your own audio room in about 35 minutes.
So first of all, if you need a keynote speaker on courage, please reach out to me. I provide LinkedIn coaching and expert services. Go to my website, marlinstark.co. I am updating my course, and that'll be launched again in a couple of weeks. So don't buy my course right now. Wait for a few more weeks. I'm writing my book, which is a memoir on courage. And I've written 18,000 words in the last week. I've just been sharing lots of stories to the computer. But my call to action here is about being an ally to the LGBTQ plus community, all communities, and to be yourself. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm on here far too much time. And if you go to my profile page, my weekly audio room, the Courage Corner, is back. Roy is speaking, Jan is speaking, and I have lots of guest speakers. And it's always a variance of Courage or LinkedIn. So you're always welcome to join us.
Well, thank you, Martin, and for joining us today. It's been an inspirational, motivational, education, and informative conversation, which I have thoroughly enjoyed. So thank you for taking the time out from your very busy life to spend time with us. And also, we have our own Linkability radio show back again next week at this time at 1 o'clock New Zealand time next Thursday afternoon. So in the meantime, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your comments. And thank you, Martin, for sharing all your wonderful thoughts with us today. We do appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks, everybody.